4 minutes.
Thanks, Cathaoirleach, again. I appreciate the Office of the County Court affording me this opportunity to speak on this matter, and also for the presence of the Minister in the House to discuss the issue. I don't normally raise on the floor of the House Cathaoirleach matters concerning to a constituent of mine, but I did get a phone call last night from a distressed person, which distressed me to such a degree that I felt I had to raise this, not just on behalf of this person, but on behalf of any person in Ireland who may be suffering such constraints in their financial situation that they can't pay a bill. Now, my understanding was, and it was very welcome at the time, as the Minister had reached an agreement with service providers, that no essential service, be it electricity or gas or whatever, would be cut off from a household as long as a payment plan was in place. This person is a working woman. She's a single parent. She was cut off yesterday from electricity. She spent last night in a relative's house, and she is completely humiliated. She feels dehumanised, and she feels a huge amount of shame. And I feel shame that this company felt that it was within its power to disconnect the power from her house, which she needs to keep her household going. Now, in relation to the agreement that was reached with the Minister, which was very welcome at the time with service providers, I want to just ask the Minister were all service providers involved in this agreement, and if not, is it the intention of the Minister to bring all service providers around the table again to make sure that this sort of thing doesn't happen? Can I ask the Minister just a few specific questions? Have other matters or other issues like this, cases like this, come across his desk or into his department? Because I hope this isn't an isolated incident, because I fear it actually isn't. Can I also ask the Minister if he's aware of the Northern Irish policy, where since 1996 Northern Ireland Electricity has had a zero disconnection policy for domestic customers unless fraud is involved, where domestic customers get into serious arrears, a meter is installed in the home, and each time money is paid into it, a proportion of it is put towards paying off the arrears. The policy followed direction from the North's utility regulator, which viewed electricity supply as a health and safety issue. And can I ask the Minister if he believes, as I believe, that electricity supply is a health and safety issue? Does the energy regulator have an opinion on competing service providers who offer inducements to customers to switch providers, but who then utilise small print to punish those who then find themselves in a situation of being unable to pay? Does the Minister or the energy regulator have any opinions the payment options offered to customers, which restricts the capacity of some people to pay, and that is actually the situation in this very case? Minister, I understand you can't respond to every individual case of every individual constituent that makes representations to a Dáil deputy. I don't make this representation on behalf of that person on her own behalf. I make it on behalf of any person up and down this country that may find themselves in a position where they are unable to pay a utility bill, and then make decisions. As I listened to today on the Liveline programme on RTE of a woman who went to a money lender and whose life is now fundamentally falling apart because of the pressure that money lender is putting herself upon. People make very stressed and unfortunate decisions when pressure is put on them, and I just want to know from the Minister if you share my concern about utility providers cutting off essential services to households, and what is your opinion as to what we can do about it in the short term and in the long term? Thanks, Cathaoirleach.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. You have 4 minutes to reply.
Thank you very much, Cathaoirleach, and thank you to Deputy ORiordain for raising this this issue. The regulator, Cathaoirleach, is a statutorily independent body established under the Act of 1999 and has responsibility for overseeing the regulation of Ireland's electricity and gas sectors. The regulator promotes competition in the electricity and natural gas markets so that customers can ultimately benefit from competitive pressures on prices. The regulator also protects the interests of final customers, especially the disadvantaged and the elderly, by ensuring that standards of services are set and codes of practice are in place to protect customers. In this regard, the regulator was of the same mind in respect of my initiative, that a protocol be concluded with regard to disconnections. And I can confirm to Deputy O'Riordan that whereas at the outset not every supplier wanted a disconnection protocol, but since the protocol was put in place, it does apply to all suppliers. I'm also well aware of the point he makes that some consumers are having trouble meeting their electricity and gas bills due to challenges facing the economy and the fact that gas and electricity prices are increasing as a result of the significant increase in the price of gas worldwide. As previously stated, I had asked the regulator to work with all electricity and gas supply companies to implement initiatives so as to ensure that disconnections for non-payment of accounts will not take place where customers are experiencing genuine financial hardship and have either entered into a payment plan or have agreed to the installation of a pay-as-you-go meter as appropriate. Now, I did not know that there was a zero disconnections policy in Northern Ireland, Cathaoirleach, but following what Deputy O'Riordan has said, I will check that. My understanding was that in Northern Ireland as well, that applies so long as you are party to a payment plan or you have installed a meter. In November 2010, the regulator introduced a number of initiatives in relation to disconnections policy. These included updating the guidelines for the disconnections code of practice, reducing the cost and allocation of costs of disconnection and reconnection for domestic customers. Now, instead of the customer bearing the entire cost, these costs are now shared equally by the supplier. And this is an interim measure effective until December 2012. The regulator is also working with the energy supply industry on interim prepayment solutions and has consulted on the challenges of so-called debt hopping with industry and other interest groups. These groups included the Money Advice and Budgeting Service and the Society of St Vincent de Paul. In October 2011, the regulator introduced a process of debt flagging into the change of suppliers' processes. This debt flagging will encourage customers and suppliers to address arrears in an upfront manner and hence prevent the accumulation of further debt and possible disconnection in the future. The regulator has also proactively facilitated a pay-as-you-go metering system, also known as a prepayment meter, in both the natural gas and electricity industry to allow customers to manage their bills more effectively. The pay-as-you-go metering system is being rolled out by all suppliers across the country. In addition to providing a useful budgeting tool to customers, suppliers are required to offer customers facing disconnection the option of a pay-as-you-go meter where this is suitable, instead of proceeding to disconnect the customer. In these circumstances, the customer's outstanding debt is placed on the meter and repaid over time. In late 2011, the regulator also carried out an audit of the guidelines of the Code of Practice on disconnections to see if suppliers were in compliance. The audit showed that all suppliers had implemented the guidelines. In the case of all examined domestic customer disconnections, the suppliers had indeed exceeded the regulator's requirements in terms of the timing of communication with customers and the numbers of attempts made to engage with customers prior to disconnection. The regulator will continue to monitor the retail electricity and gas markets, looking specifically at the issues of customer debt and disconnections over the coming months, and from now on will report quarterly on these matters in their electricity and gas retail markets reports.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy O'Riordan, you have 2 minutes for supplementary.
Thanks, Minister, and I appreciate your extensive reply. The case that I am referring to is one which I hope will not be repeated across the country. I'm glad that the regulator has conducted an audit of all service providers late last year. I'm glad that there's a quarterly review taking place as well. I think it's important, though, to reiterate the fact to anybody in this country who is under payment pressure that this criteria is in place, that this agreement has been reached, that it was a government initiative for it to happen, that initially some of the companies that weren't involved in it have come on board, that customers have armoury when dealing as individuals with service providers. And again, Minister, there are companies who are competing in this market who are making the switch from one service provider to another seem seamless, seem profitable, seem beneficial for a customer who is actually undergoing serious financial strain. And they switch from maybe a more traditional service provider to a newer one on the market, and before they know it, it's the worst decision they ever made, because this new service provider has found some glitch within the terms and agreements which may have been glossed over by the individual, and therefore they can come down heavy on payment. There's also an issue around the payment plan which they permit customers to get involved in. So I congratulate you on your initial initiative. We wouldn't be having this discussion unless the initial initiative had been initiated, if you like. But can I just urge you again and your department to be rigorous in this regard, because the phone call I received last night was so distressing. I can only assume it's happening up and down the country. I don't trust the companies involved. I think a fear factor in relation to people having their services disconnected helps the companies to pressurise those in various communities to pay up on monies that they may not necessarily have. And again, I would make the point that the last thing we need is people accessing money that they just can't pay back in relation to money lenders or sharks in their own communities who give them simple answers, and therefore the situations are compounded. Service providers have a huge responsibility. It is a health and safety issue. If people are legitimately trying to get their house in order and their bills regulated and trying to get their situation on a more sound financial footing, they should be assisted. They should not be dealing with unscrupulous service companies who are trying to browbeat them into paying monies that they just don't have. Thanks,
thank you, Deputy Minister. 2 minutes for final.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. I agree with Deputy ORiordain that this is a distressing case. We have been fortunate, I think, in having a more mild winter than has been the experience in the 2 previous years. But the fact of the matter remains that gas prices globally have been in a constantly upward trend. And in fact, the weakening euro also makes it more expensive in terms of imports. The weakening euro is probably helpful to a lot of our exporters in terms of exporting outside of this country to, say, the neighbouring island and so on. But one area where it's certainly not helpful is in terms of the import costs associated with oil and gas. There has been an increase of some 6.7% in the rate of disconnections, which I think, against the background I've just painted, is unsurprising. Now, the regulator's assessment is that 30% of those domestic premises are vacant, and so on. But nonetheless, it is a concern. And I sincerely hope, Cathaoirleach, that between now and December of this year, that the uptake on the pay-as-you-go meters will continue to rise, because I think it's very important that the protocol is observed on both sides. The no disconnections protocol assumes that you're in a payment plan or that you install a pay-as-you-go meter. And, I could only recommend that would be done. I mean, it's funny, factors like the weather do seem to motivate people, that if you have a very cold winter, people suddenly realise they ought to have taken these steps. If it's a relatively mild period, the installations are fewer, and so on. And we see that in the area of retrofit as well. So I would urge and acknowledge the work of organisations like MABS, like St Vincent de Paul, but I would urge that they would seek to spread the word about the no disconnections protocol, and to encourage as many people as possible to sign up.